Hello! In this video we're going to be looking a wee bit more at percentages, and in particular we're going to be using a calculator. So our learning intention for this video is that we're going to be able to find a percentage of any amount by using a calculator, and I'm going to show you a method for doing that. Okay, so let's look at a first example. So what we've got here is 53% of 90. That's what we want to find. And the first thing that I'm going to get us to do in this method here is we're going to take that percentage, 53% in this case, and we are going to change it into a decimal. So 53%, that's the same as 0.53, isn't it? And how do I get from 53% to 0.53? Well, all I'm doing is dividing by 100, right? Because that's sort of what percent means. It means out of 100. So once I've done that, I've changed it into a decimal by dividing by 100. I need to bring in this 90 here, and what we're going to do with the 90 is we're going to multiply by the 90. So 53% of 90 is going to be the same as 0.53 multiplied by 90. Let's write that down. That's my working there. And then I type that into my calculator. And it's really important, even though we're using a calculator, I am still going to write my working. I'm going to write this bit down, and then I type it into my calculator, and then we get the answer. So 0.53 multiplied by 90, my calculator has told me that that is 47.7. Now, if your calculator has not told you that answer as a decimal, perhaps you've got it as a fraction or something similar, you will need to do one of two things. You might have a button on your calculator that says change with some arrows going sort of around it like this, or you might have a button with an S and a D and an arrow going between the two like that. If you tap that button perhaps a couple of times, you will be able to change your answer into a decimal. And let's go for decimals for these answers here. So if you've got a Sharp calculator, it'll look like this. If you've got a Casio calculator, it'll look like this. Other calculators, you'll work it out, I'm sure. Okay, so that's our first example. Let's try another. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take this percentage and we're going to change it into a decimal. And we do that by dividing by 100. So what's my 17% going to be as a decimal? Well, it's going to be 0.17. And we're going to do the same as before. We're going to multiply it by this number here, 32. And that will give me my answer. So I'm writing up my working, then I type it in my calculator, 32. And this time I've got 5.44. So that's my answer there. Do a few more of these. So we've got to be careful here because there is a temptation for us to say 8%. Well, that's going to be 0.8, isn't it? But that wouldn't be right because, remember, the way we get our decimal number is we divide the percentage by 100. So I take my 8 and I divide it by 100. If I divided it by 10, I would get 0.8, wouldn't I? So when I divide it by 100, it's got to be 0.08. So that's something to look out for. When we've got these single-digit percentages, we need to, so it's going to be 0.0, in this case 8. And we're multiplying again. We're multiplying this time by 54. So I write down my working, then I type it in my calculator. What have I got? This time 4.32 is my answer. And if you're not already, it would be a really good idea, I reckon, to just with your calculator go along and with what I'm writing here and what I'm typing in, just to make sure that you get the same answer that I do. A few more examples then. Now this time is 80% of 54. So if we just compare that to the last one, this one asked us to find 8% of 54. So I did 0.08 times 54. This one is 80% of 54. So look very carefully about what's different with this one. So 80%, change it into a decimal by dividing by 100. And what do I get if I divide it by 100? Well, I get 0.8. So I've got my 0.8. We could write that, by the way, we could write that as 0.80, but adding that 0 on the end doesn't change the value of this number at all. It's still the same number, so I'm not going to bother with that extra 0, but you'd get the same answer if you did. and we're going to multiply it again by 54. So in my calculator, I'm typing 0.8 times 54, and this time I've got the answer equals 43.2. And again, if we compare that back to the previous one, that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Because we found 8%, it was 4.32. When we find 80%, it's 43.2. So it's just 10 times bigger, which again sort of makes sense, doesn't it? 8%, 10 times bigger, that's going to be 80%, 43.2. Okay, a couple more examples here. Now this one is a wee bit trickier because the percentage already has a decimal in it, but we're still going to deal with it in the exact same way. We're going to take that percentage, we're going to change it into a decimal, and we do that by dividing by 100 still. So this divide by 100 step, I suppose you could do in your calculator, but probably we should be able to do this divided by 100 in our heads without having to use the calculator. Everything sort of shifts down a couple of places. So I'm going to get 0.382, and we're looking for 38.2% of 115 this time. So 115. That's what I write down, and I'm going to type it into my calculator now. I've got 43.93. Hopefully you got the same. Okay, one final example on these. I think we've probably got the idea by now. Not 34, 3.4% of 360. So let's think carefully about what this is going to look like as a decimal. It's going to be 0.034, isn't it? Because if we divide it by, if I just divided it by 10, I'd get 0.34. So dividing it by 100, I'm going to get 0.034. Everything shifted down twice because we have divided by 100. It's not letting me put the dots on the divide. There we go. Good. So I've changed my percentage into a decimal. Now I'm going to multiply by this 360 up here. 0.034 times 360, and I'm expecting quite a small number this time, aren't I? Because 3.4% is a tiny little bit. I've got a bit more than 12. I've got equals 12.24. There we go. Okay, lovely stuff. I'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.